Welcome back to Real Estate 101. Today we're going to continue our discussion on home renovations, and I'm pleased to be joined once again by Daniel Ott of Artisan Contracting. Daniel, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Joe.
All right, Dan, so today we're going to talk about renovating or rebuilds. And I want to ask you, what exactly are we talking about here? Are we talking about an entire renovation or only part of a renovation or of a house?
Well, the same reasoning really stands behind both of those, whether we're talking about tearing down the entire house and rebuilding it, or if we're only talking about one wing of the house or one room of the house, the same reasoning will fall under both of those. But although we have had a lot of calls lately where once we're talking to the client, it is turning into a lot of almost completely tear down the entire house and start over again.
All right, now how do you determine what's best for the client?
It's going to vary from client to client, but a lot of it is asking a lot of the right questions, trying to delve in what is the motivation behind why they want to do the project that they're thinking of doing. And oftentimes we walk out of there with a completely different scope of work, if you will, than when we first went there. And people have a thought as to what they want to do.
An idea,
and they think, or they have a knowledge of their need, and they think that this idea is the best to satisfy that need, but we might come up with some better ideas for them.
Okay, so when would you suggest someone rebuild as opposed to renovate?
I'm always going to suggest what is best for the client. And all I can do as a contractor or as a professional is provide all of the information, and what's best for them may not be what I think is best. What's best for the client often is what kind of decision are they comfortable with making at that time. A lot of it's going to depend as well the cost savings. Sometimes rebuilding is cheaper, and sometimes renovating a room or a house is cheaper. That might come into play. But one of the nice things is if you are rebuilding, whether it's just a section or the whole house, completely starting from new, from scratch, is going to burst the design ideas wide open.
Okay, so does the rebuilding of an entire house change the way a municipality looks at the permit application?
Yes, your fees may be higher, your application process is going to be longer, and we've talked about how the planning process already is longer than the building process, so you're just going to be lengthening it even more. As well, you might need to have new gas, water, and sewer hookups.
Okay, now, would you say there's anything to be wary of when we're talking about rebuilding of an entire house?
In regards to the permit application, absolutely. I have heard horror stories before where the city has talked, and again, this is when the homeowner is doing it themselves rather than hiring a professional, but the municipality has talked the homeowner into taking out a demolition permit, and before even applying for the building permit, and they tear the house down, and now they have a nightmare of a time trying to rebuild something on that property.
Okay, so can you rebuild an entire house and still have the municipality treat it as a normal renovation?
Yes and no. Different municipalities are going to have different restrictions or bylaws on how this process works, and a different percentage of the existing home that has to remain in order for it to be viewed as a renovation. And typically we tell people this is going to be leave your existing footprint in place, so the existing foundation, and maybe one or two of the walls on the main level are still standing. However, this doesn't mean that you can't put additions on to increase your footprint and still come up with a completely new structure in the end.
Okay, now, does this save clients money doing it that way?
It should, because you're not doing all that foundation work. And this is the same reason why I often suggest to clients to put a second story on their house rather than building out on a bungalow. The reasoning being all that below the grade work for oftentimes people don't even use the basement is just extra time and money that's getting used in something that could be used in finishes. Okay. The other thing that you're going to save more than money is also the time. So typically when we do below the grade work, we call it in the hole, and you're in the hole for about a month. You can save a month off of that construction process and get into your finished product much sooner. But if you do put additions on 3 sides of your house, let's say, you're probably not going to save money or time.
Okay, so what are the downsides to not removing a foundation?
If you have an existing block foundation, your new house is still going to have a block foundation. Now, while this is adequate, it's not as strong as what we would typically do these days with a poured concrete foundation. Now, if you are concerned about the strength of the block, we can fill it with concrete as we're working, and that's going to get your strength back up. And if you're concerned about the porosity of the block and having water leakage into your basement, then actually, whether you're concerned about it or not, I'm going to suggest that while we're working there, we waterproof the existing basement. And this is not going to extend the time that it takes to do the project, even though we have to do some digging, because the foundation's already there. We can start building right away, and the waterproofing can be done at any time at the same time as everything else going on.
Okay, Dan, so can you give our viewers an example of a partial rebuild that you may have done or designed?
A project that we've done actually quite a few times is when you have a split level home, and say you have your garage and your entrance level here, and it splits up into a dining room, living room, kitchen, eating area, and then it splits again into your bedrooms. Typically people want to redo this middle area here with the living room, dining room, kitchen, eating area, and they want to make it wide open. What generally happens is we talk them into actually rebuilding that whole side of the house, and even keeping the floor structure and sometimes even the walls there. But by removing the roof and putting new trusses on, we can open a lot of design ideas. We don't need to put beams and posts in anymore. We can vault the ceiling so you get a much more larger visual space. And when the roof is off, it's much easier to rebuild some of the walls because there's no load on it, and we can move doors and windows around.
All right, and what about some examples for some, home builds?
I've got a great example for you, Joe. We did a house about 1.5 years ago, and when it was finished, it was just over 5,000 square feet of finished space. It was a bungalow with a walkout basement, so from the back, kind of a 2-story. And the project kept progressing and growing as we went. And it would have been much more cost effective and much quicker to have done it all right from the start that way and to have rebuilt the entire thing. So what we started with was putting a small addition on the back, 2 stories tall, and refinishing part of the basement. And then we needed to refinish the entire basement. And then they added redoing parts of the main level, and then doing the whole main level. And they said, well, while we're at it, why don't we rip the roof off and put 17-foot ceilings upstairs, you know? Now, the problem with that is if all those decisions had progressed during the planning stage, it would have been okay. But by this time, we'd already built most of it, and then they're still changing their mind. We have to go back to the municipality for more approvals. The same inspections have to happen all over again for a different section. And we have to redo some of the stuff we've already done, as well as when we ripped the roof off, parts that had already been finished, or not quite finished, but were underway in the basement, some of it got ruined, so we had to redo that anyways. And it would have been much more cost effective to have torn the whole house down. We could have put 9-foot ceilings in the basement, and just opened up the design possibilities a lot more.
All right, Dan, so for today's final question, do you have any last tips or advice for anybody that is considering a major renovation or rebuild on their home?
Keep your mind open. I say this to a lot of people all the time. The worst clients, or the most conflict we're going to have with people, is when we come meet with someone and they say, this is what I want to do and I don't want to stray from this. If you can keep your mind open, give me your needs, and I might be able to suggest something that's a little better than what you thought of at first.
All right, Dan, good stuff. Thanks for coming on today's show.
Thanks for having me, Joe. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and hopefully we've helped some viewers out there. And if any of you are thinking of doing a major renovation, or even thinking of completely rebuilding your entire house right off the bat, give me a call. The first consultation is always free. We can sit down, have a coffee, and decide which is the best route for you to follow.
So there you have it. If you're thinking about a major renovation project or an entire rebuild of your home, get in contact with Daniel Ott of Artisan Contracting. Join us next month where we're going to talk about en-suites. I'm your host, Joe Tercera. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.